Now, have you ever thought about how it might be a good thing, it might even be a blessing to get called out on something? About how you're living, about how you're believing. It could be really good. And deep down, we really know that. The book of Galatians is written to combat a certain problem. The Apostle Paul writes this to this church in Galatia that is being overtaken by people who are trying to say that to be a Christian, you can't just embrace Christ. You actually, if you're a non-Jew, you actually have to become Jewish and then a Christian. And what's going on there is that teaching is undermining this glorious gospel that doesn't just unite people with God, but unites people with one another, and specifically people of all nations. That's what was going on. And so Paul is writing this letter to that church to warn them of that, to combat that. Now, in chapter 2, after in chapter 1 he kind of sets it up and talks about how dangerous it is, he tells a story of his encounter with another apostle. And you may have heard the story, Peter, whenever he is in the presence of Jewish people, now he's first in the presence of non-Jewish, Gentile people, but then when the Jews come along, what does he do? Well, he switches lunch tables, right? He moves away from the Gentiles, distances himself from them, and goes back to hang out with the Jews, lest they get the wrong idea, unless they start rebuking him and thinking poorly of him. Basically, he's a coward, as we've seen him be in the past, of course, in denying Jesus. Now, Paul talks about coming to him and rebuking him. In chapter 2, he speaks of seeing Peter in this position and going to him and saying, if you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew. So in other words, if you're not recognizing your own need to cling to your Jewishness in normal life, how can you force the Gentiles to live like Jews? So how can you reverse course and try to get these non-Jews to become Jewish again? How can you do that? And before that, he says, but when I saw that their conduct, Peter's associates' conduct, was not in step with the truth of the gospel, I said this to Cephas, or Peter, before them all. He said, when I saw this, that's when I called him, when I called them out. And I just want you to think about that with me for a second. We in America especially are pretty prideful. We're pretty independent. We think pretty highly of ourselves. Of course, all humans do, but I think the air we breathe here makes it even more of a problem. And we don't like it when people call us out. But I was talking to my friend Hannah the other day as we were sitting around discussing things, and she was actually on Zoom, and she piped in because she hasn't been feeling too well. She just pointed out how hard it must have been for Peter specifically to hear this critique. Remember, Peter is the man that is recognized as the rock. He's seen as the pillar of the disciples, right? And think about it. Paul, he's the new guy, right? He's the guy that's going around persecuting and killing Christians, and suddenly he's changed, and suddenly he's the star, and he's the preacher, and everybody's listening to him. And Paul walks up to him and rebukes him. And you know what? Peter listens. And I think that's a great model for us, no matter where we think we're at in terms of our maturity. And we always think we're further along than we are. We need to be expectant that the Holy Spirit would want to grow us and that He would speak through other people to draw us closer to the Lord. And I want you to hear this today, Christian, specifically my white brother and sister, because this passage is talking about reconciliation. It's talking about bringing people together. Listen to your brothers and sisters. Listen to your black brothers and sisters. Also listen to your white brothers and sisters. Trying to appeal to you. This isn't right. It needs to be changed. We need to be brought together. Justice needs to come, and be open to, and even just longing for, people to speak the truth and love to you. We need it desperately. It is such a beautiful grace, a picture of the kindness of God when people come to us like Paul did to Peter here.